It's time for State Your Case with George Korda on Newstalk 98.7 WOKI.
Good afternoon. Welcome to State Your Case. I'm George Korda. This is Newstalk 98.7, the news and talk of East Tennessee. We've been off for a couple of weeks because of the Titans schedule, and I think it might be true next week as well. I'm not sure. I'll have to check that. But I don't want to waste time here because we got somebody on the phone. He's been a guest before, spoken to us about the situation in Gaza between Hamas and Israel. And I want to welcome back Dan Mariaschin, who is the CEO of B'rith International, an international Jewish organization. And I wanted to get Dan's take on what he's seen and heard, and if there's anything he knows about that we ought to know that we don't know. So, Dan, what do we need to know?
Well, thank you, George. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. Well, we've had a pretty busy week, and in fact, we've got a pretty busy day today with Hamas violations almost right out of the gate. So, there's was a peace plan that was introduced by President Trump, very detailed, 20 points. And the principal points in that agreement really will make the difference as to whether this succeeds or it doesn't. Now, what were they? They were the disarming of Hamas, the deradicalization. In other words, anyone who had anything to do with Hamas who is still there in Gaza has to go through some kind of vetting process, and in some cases, and probably in many cases, some of them will be exiled. And then is the provision that's extremely important in this plan, that perhaps maybe is more important than anything else, that Hamas will have no future role in governing Gaza. So that's where we are today. And you remember President Reagan, when he was negotiating with the Russians, he took an old Russian proverb and he said, trust and verify. And when it comes to Hamas, I would change that to read mistrust and be sure to verify, because we've had these violations today. So it's going to be a long haul in what they call the second phase of this plan.
All right. Now, I have been busy today. So what are these violations?
Well, there was an attack on Israeli soldiers in 3 places by Hamas. This is a violation. There's a ceasefire which is going on. Remember, we started this with the release of the living Israeli hostages. Part of that release of the living hostages, part of that point in Trump's plan, was also to send back to the Israeli families the deceased hostages, of which there were 28. Now, Hamas has been dragging its feet. There are still 16 of those remains that have to be returned to the Israelis. So the Hamas was in violation on returning the hostages, the deceased hostages, and now, today, has fired on Israeli soldiers in 3 places. I think 2 soldiers were killed and 3 were wounded.
Yeah, this is a story out of the Times of Israel 3 hours ago.
Right.
2 soldiers killed, 3 wounded in attack on troops in Gaza. IDF launches wave of strikes on Hamas.
Right. That's right. And those strikes are probably going on as we speak. Listen, Hamas, in my view, has no interest in giving up. They have been defeated, but they are intent on staying. And so this is classic. This should not have been unexpected, that Hamas would go slow on return of the dead hostages, that they would cause some trouble by firing on Israeli soldiers, to make it a situation where you'd have to go back in and kind of renegotiate. And what they're doing basically is nickel and diming those who brought about this agreement. That would be the administration, President Trump, the Israelis with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and all of the countries that have bought in to this plan. This is not only a violation by Hamas, it is also a finger in the eye by Hamas, and we have to take it seriously.
Well, here's a question based on history. Toward the end of World War II, this is after the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The emperor had recorded a surrender message to be played over Japanese radio. It was going to be the first time the Japanese people had heard their emperor's voice. And there was a group of military officers who so opposed any surrender, even in light of what was happening to Japan, that they tried to stage a coup to overthrow the government and get the emperor to withdraw that surrender statement that they knew was coming. So there is a possibility that there's a fight going on, and the coup was put down by troops loyal to the emperor. So is there a possibility that there's a fight going on within Hamas against those who are just wanting to kill Israelis and never wanting to stop, and some who are saying, you know, we've been through enough here. They're killing us like crazy, and we need to stop this?
Well, I'd like to believe that would be the case, but with Hamas, these are folks, you remember the spokesman for Hamas said about a year into the war, it's a 2-year war, he said about a year into the war that we want to do this again and again and again. It's very hard to, these are not only barbaric individuals, but they are perverse. Killing is part of their DNA. I mean, think about this. Think about this, George. There were 20 Israeli living hostages, and every Israeli, and there were 10 million Israelis, every Israeli knew their names, knows about their family, saw interviews, put out posters and pictures, and went to demonstrations to get these 20 people back. Every life counted. And yet, with Hamas, because of what they engaged in this attempt to enter into Israel, which they did successfully, hitting these villages, these barbaric murders and rapes and killing children in front of parents and parents in front of children. Killing is exactly what they do. So they didn't mind if thousands and thousands of their own people were killed in the war. And why were they killed? Because there were 450 miles of tunnels over which stood apartment buildings, schools, hospitals, mosques. This is a death cult. They are fighting they want to fight to the finish. And you're absolutely right. The emperor did that statement. The Allies demanded of the Nazis and of Imperial Japan that there be unconditional surrender. They didn't nickel and dime.
That's right.
They weren't nickel and diming us. And that, frankly, this is where we have to stand now. We have to say, that's it. That's it.
Well, you're correct. You're correct. In fact, I wrote one of my newspaper columns about that. That the issue was that the United States and its allies had one condition for the surrender of both Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, which was unconditional surrender. And we blockaded Japan. We bombed Japan. All of the U.S. and its allies. We bombed Germany. We tried to starve. We tried to do everything we could do to get them to end the war. And Israel is in a position, and I would ask people who would argue against Israel's actions in Gaza, I would put it to them like this. All right, you're the president, or you're responsible for the security of the United States and of protection of American citizens. A group of armed terrorists comes across the U.S. border and kills the equivalent of 40,000 Americans, which is the equivalent of how many Israelis died in the Hamas raid of October 7th. They kill 40,000 Americans and take 1,000 back with them as hostages. You are responsible for the security of the United States. What do you do? Nobody ever answers me. Nobody. Oh, we'd enter into... Go ahead.
Yeah, George, it's even worse than that, because, the blood libel, the lie, the big lie, about Israel committing genocide, think about this. I mean, first of all, in order for there to be genocide, there has to be an intent. There has to be an intention to do that. There was no intention here. If Israel had wanted to really lay it on, its Air Force in 2 or 3 days that would have been the end of the war. They would have solved that problem within a matter of a few days. On the contrary, what happened is that Israel has lost over 1,000 soldiers and has had 6,000 wounded in trying to defeat Hamas. Why? Because it was holding the hostages. They had to be careful, and because Israelis were concerned about civilian casualties. They were concerned about it, and so they lost the element of surprise. And as I said, they've taken many casualties. So these big lies continue to be out there. And the question that you've asked is the key question. If this happened to us, and by the way, this is Israel's 5th war against Hamas. It's not the first; it's the 5th since the early part of the 21st century. So there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and plain blatant lying out there. And the Israelis are saying, okay, we've gone into this agreement now. We have a ceasefire. Hamas can have no future role in governing Gaza. It can have no weapons, and it needs to be de-radicalized. And then a process can go ahead to build, as President Trump would like to do, to build a new situation in Gaza, which will have security for the state of Israel. And for the Palestinians, they will be free of the terrorist thugs who continue to run Gaza to this day. The first thing, hardly an hour had passed since this agreement was signed when Hamas's police were out in the street. And what were they doing? They were killing at point-blank range, or before firing squads, they were killing their opponents. They were killing some members of the clans in Gaza who wanted Hamas out. And this is what they continue to do. They are killers, and they're part of a death cult which venerates the loss of life and not peace.
Well, Dan, your point, here's the point, and then I know our time is up with you. But here's the thing that I think is patently obvious to any sentient being, that all of these protests against Israeli genocide are a bunch of nonsense. These same people that are protesting against Israeli genocide are absolutely silent about Hamas coming out and murdering its own people. They're absolutely silent about Russia killing people in Ukraine. You don't see people taking over university buildings in the United States because Russia is killing people in Ukraine. This has to do with Israel, a Jewish state, and a democracy. And the left is not, shall we say, enamored of either one from the standpoint of where Israel sits. And I want to read one thing out of the Hamas Covenant of 1988. This is what Hamas wrote in their covenant as the effect of negotiations and discussions. And here it is. There is no solution for the Palestinian question except through jihad, meaning holy war. Initiatives, proposals, and international conferences are all a waste of time and vain endeavors. The Palestinian people know better than to consent. They're having their future, rights, and fate toyed with. In other words, any discussions you think we're involved in, we're not involved in them because we want holy war, and that's what we're after. So every time we appease a group like this, they don't go away, they just metastasize.
Well, you said it better than me, George. I'll tell you something. The sooner Hamas leaves the scene, the better it is for everyone concerned. You're absolutely right. Israel's a country that wants to live in peace. It has no designs on any of its neighbors. It has contributed greatly to the betterment of mankind in so many different ways, in medicine and in science and in so many other things. That's what it wants to do. Its people want peace. They are not allowed to have that peace because of their neighbor in Gaza. And so the only answer to this is that Hamas leaves the scene. Now, the points are there in the Trump peace plan. Now it has to be enforced.
Well, my prediction is this, that there are elements of Hamas that absolutely, and I don't know if they're the majority, my guess is they would be based on their covenants, that are going to do everything they can possibly do to keep this agreement from lasting. And so the question is, if they start killing Israelis again, where does it go from there? All right, Dan Mariaschin, I want to thank you for joining us. I appreciate you staying on longer than I initially talked to your folks about, sharing about, and I look forward to having you back on again. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, George. Take care.
You too.